if this was like 2017, Cloud9 would have won the offseason because essentially what they have built is an LCK team in North America. Because not only are a lot of their players from Korea, but their coaching staff is pseudo from Korea as well too. So I mean, all jokes aside, Jack has actually bet pretty much all in on imports from every single angle. And there's actually an interesting video where Jack talks about his kind of philosophy about imports and whatnot from Korea and the fact that he actually thinks they're not only are they good, but they can also build a brand in North America. That's why he took a chance on Impact. So yeah, go look for that esports salon video by Thorn. It's very good. It has a whole bunch of owners in it and stuff. I think that was at a time to where Noah Winston was actually still in the league. But anyways, so I'm just going to kind of put some foreshadowing in here that I'm going to save the juiciness of the coaching staff for the end. So if you're looking for that, just know that. And I already did a video on LS specifically and his situation. So I'm not going to go into full in-depth about him coaching this entire squad. So just go watch that video if you want to know that. Anyways, so the entire problem, I think, that I have with this roster, and not to say that I don't think that this is a good roster, but the one problem and the major problem that I have with it is that it has the potential for lack of cohesion due to maybe not having a Korean coach, but also just the culture that needs to, be, I guess, instilled to overcome maybe some of those different cultural aspects. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So the lineup consists of Summit, Blabber, Fudge in mid lane, Berserker, and Winsome as support. So let's go from top to bottom as usual. First, we have Summit. From what I've been hearing just about a lot of different analysts and a lot of commentary about this guy, is that he is supposedly very, very good. Now, as far as how good, I don't really know because I haven't really seen any history about this guy. I've never actually seen him play at all, so I'm not sure what to expect from him. All that I know is that he is from the LCK and he's coming over here. So that's kind of a big question mark for me. And I think it's taking a little bit of a chance of, just this guy and whatnot. I guess he apparently, played for a Freak of Freaks and then Sandbox Gaming, I guess. So I think in terms of that and in terms of the fact that he was one of probably the standout players of Sandbox Gaming, it's pretty safe to say that this is a good bet to go for him, especially considering that I think he was a pretty big component of the hot agency round, free agency round that was happening for 2022. So yeah, I think this is probably a safe bet, but as I said, I don't really know much about the guy, so I can't very strictly comment on him, but we'll get into just the overall arching idea of him being a component within this roster. So then we move to Blabber. Now, Blabber, I've always been willing to buy this guy's stock, right? No matter how far that it dips, regardless, you just buy the dip. But what I'm concerned about, and this arises as, you get further and further into summer split, of course, spring split, he was pretty good. And he kind of gets out the gate, and I think he gets out the gate because a lot of people under assume what he's capable of doing every single time. And he just fucking blows the doors off of everyone's expectations in terms of what he can do, even though they know what he can do. They know that he could take over games, etc. So, but I'm wondering, as such, with this new roster and the fact that can he play more than one style? I want to see him be able to play a consistent control style along with his aggressive nature. of what he is just innately as a player. And I felt like throughout every iteration of what he has been as a player, all the coaches have essentially said, okay, we're going to embrace the aggressive nature of Blabber. And this is famously what Reaper did, was he didn't actually leash the dog at all. He just let Blabber loose, allowed him to do whatever that he really wanted to do, but then he would have the surrounding team cater to him essentially. And so I don't think that's a very sustainable way actually to have your play style. I don't think that is sustainable in the entire esports scene. And we see this, by the way, with the likes of Jizuke, and the fact that I told people that Jizuke, while yes, I think it was impressive that, he was very good in 2021 over in summer, and I thought he was fantastic on EG, but the point is that everyone else had to play around him, right? Because he would not bend his playstyle to anyone else. So therefore, what the coaching staff had to do over there, Peter Dunn specifically, was that they had said, okay, well, since no one is going to be able to dictate exactly how Jizuke plays, we're just going to have to play around him. And I feel like that's what Blabber's playstyle is. It's slowly becoming more and more of that nature, and the fact that you have to play around Blabber or else he throws the fucking game. And so I'm wondering if he can then morph his playstyle to be more about playing more for the team, just not being as selfish as he is, of course. So, and I'm wondering if the coaching staff is able to actually dictate this, because it was clear that both Max Waldo and Vigar couldn't be able to do this, and the direction maybe might have come from the head coach themselves in the forms of both Reignover or Mithy, and they weren't able to actually do that. So I'm wondering if it's going to take a different approach with LS at the helm. We'll have to see, but that's one of the big issues that I have with this lineup, and I think it's going to be a big area for improvement, and if he does improve, I will be very impressed by it. Now, then we go to the mid lane with Fudge. I'm actually not worried about Fudge lane swapping, and here's why. Is because I think he's a very intelligent player. I think he has the ability to pick up things very quickly in terms of improvement. I mean, we saw in the very beginning of how he really wasn't very good at top lane. Let's just be honest. He lacked a lot of the fundamentals. He lacked just the theory of what it is to be a top laner and what makes a good top laner. And it was just pretty abysmal play, but there's the caveat that he quickly shored that up, like in a matter of weeks, I would say. And by, like week 5, week 6 of spring split, he was actually, pretty decent. And then going into summer, he was actually really fucking good. And so you have this guy who has a knack for being able to pick up things like very quickly. And so that's why I don't have a big worry about Fudge. But there is a caveat with him, in the fact that his biggest strength in top lane that I had noticed early on was his ability to manipulate the wave. And I did an interview with him talking about this actual subject, and it was a pretty in-depth interview, and it gave me a lot of insight into like his mind as a player and maybe how he thinks and approaching the game itself, and it helped me understand exactly how he improved and whatnot, and I'll probably link that in the description below. But the point is that with wave manipulation, I don't think it's as important in mid lane as it is top lane, and so therefore his biggest strength is now really a non-factor when it's not a complete non-factor, right? Because there's always going to be wave manipulation, obviously, especially as solo laners, it's more important, but it's less important because top lane is not as long as mid lane, or rather mid lane is not as long as top lane, right? So therefore you have a basically there's a larger margin of error when it comes to being a mid laner and not being able to manipulate your wave properly as it does top lane. Now, he can take those strengths into mid lane against people that don't know how to manipulate the wave, and so therefore create an inherent advantage that other people might not be wary of because they're traditionally mid laners. But as I said, it's a very short lane, so I don't think it's really going to equate to that big of an advantage. But I could see the theory as to maybe why Fudge would actually be a pretty good mid laner. But also, too, I'm not sure if he has enough killer instinct to be a mid laner, because traditionally the best mid laners actually have a fucking crazy killer instinct. And when I saw Fudge in top lane, it wasn't that he had a traditional sense of what it is to have a killer instinct. It's that he used wave manipulation to then create setups for his jungler to then come help him deal with the enemy top laner. That's not the same thing in mid lane. Oftentimes mid lane you can actually get a solo kill pretty easily just because of the champion pool and how it works, especially with the damage associated with all of that. So with that said, he's not really gonna have, such a strong jungler presence, I would say. I don't know, maybe he will, and maybe he'll call for Blabber constantly, but I just think that there needs to be maybe more of a do-it-yourself kind of nature when it comes to mid lane versus top lane. So those are my concerns with Fudge going mid lane, but as I said before, I think he's actually a pretty smart guy, and I think he could actually catch up very fast. But don't expect him to come out the gate being a great mid laner, especially considering like traditional mid lane champions and whatnot. He's still going to have to shore up his pool, even though top lane does share some things within mid lane, which he will then be able to utilize to throw people off, which will be one of his strengths as well too, which is going to have a draft advantage. But he's still going to have to work on his mechanics of the traditional mid laners, which, obviously he doesn't play top, things like Zoe, Syndra, etc., which, he's been playing a lot of Zoe from what I hear. So he's trying to work on those things specifically. But, as I said, it's still a different play style, and his strengths are going to matter less within mid lane. So I'm worried about that. Then we come to Berserker, who is coming from T1's sister team or academy team, right? This guy is like, I don't know, for some reason being heralded as like the second coming of fucking, Uzi or some shit. Actually, I don't really know what his play style is, but he's supposed to be a very good ADC. So that's what we have to expect from him. He's coming from LCK, and he's supposed to be very good. Now, the good thing about this is, but the weird thing about this is the fact that he's coming from LCK, and really all it is that I guess you really just need an aimbot as an ADC player. And typically what we see is the fact that, well, since solo laners have more of an influence, you have Koreans being imported from the solo lanes. So that is to say then that Fudge needs to hold his weight as a solo laner. He's from Oceania, but whatever. Basically North America. I guess it makes it worse actually that that he is the mid laner for this team, right? Technically. But now we have an import in the ADC position. And so really the whole communication aspect actually doesn't matter that much, because an ADC doesn't really need to communicate. They just need to be told where to go, and you, as I always say, you just point the gun where you want to hurt people, etc. Right? So I don't have a very big problem with this pickup. I think it's actually quite intelligent if you have a lot of faith in Fudge, which I see no reason as to not have faith in him. Then we come to Winsome. This is actually where it gets interesting, because Winsome I think he has dual nationality. So he was actually, I think he was born in Korea. He is Korean, and he has nationality. Oh no, he was born in America, but he's Korean, and I think he has dual nationality of both Korea and North America. And so he just chose North America as, to be put on his status for the LCS or, within League of Legends itself, because if you guys are like old school enough to know, back in the day, you had to commit to a status if you had both dual citizenship, but also too, there was an old rule of just like when they initiated the nationality clause or the import clause, they had to then say, okay, what do you claim as, your home region? And so, famously, Amazing claimed North America as his home region so that he wouldn't be counted as an import. So you could think of this kind of in a similar fashion, I guess. So the problem, and like, I don't know anything about this Winsome guy, but one of the big problems that I have with it is the fact that he is the Dongsang to Summit. And so that means like he's going to be the younger brother to Summit because Summit is older. And in Korean culture, as you guys probably know, you have to respect your elders quite a lot. Now, I'm not sure how embedded Winsome is within Korean culture itself, like the motherland of, Korea itself, or if he is more Americanized. I'm not sure. I don't know anything about this guy. But that still may play a part into this because I assume that he is going to be the grammatical translator for Summit. And so that's going to be very important to instill a relationship between these guys. And I think the natural relationship that's going to form is, the Donsang and the Hyung of their relationship of, Summit being the older guy. And then I think the reverse of this is actually a good thing in that he is the Hyung to Berserker because he's older than Berserker. Berserker, I think, is like 18 or something, and Winsome is 19. Right? So there's a clear age difference. It's not a very big one, but you still have to respect your elders within Korean culture, even if it's just a year anyways. So he is technically the Hyung to Berserker, right? So I think it's not as bad as it seems, but I think there could still be some snafus if Winsome doesn't respect Summit, in that type of relationship, because then I think it can actually turn sour. So we'll see. I don't actually know if, this guy is super American or, if he's more in tune with Korean culture. I'm not very sure. So, this is the little nuance that exists within Cloud9. And then this brings this over to the coaching staff, which is LS. And that, will he be able to bring this all together? And I mean this more than just strategically, because I think most of us can admit that LS has a bright mind for the game. And there will be some doubters of him, though, because, of course, he has the theoretical idea of the game rather than the real-time application of said theories, right? I always say that I compare LS to a theoretical physicist, and the fact that he has some bright ideas about the game, but the problem is with theoretical physicists is that oftentimes they don't get to apply their theories. The theories are then tested by the actual physicist, in the labs and whatnot. And so he just comes up with the brilliant theories, and a lot of them sound really good on paper, but it's whether they can actually be applied to real life. So we'll see if that comes into fruition. Not only that, but he has to be someone that has to deal with conflict resolution too, because he's the head coach. It's more than just knowing strategically about the game. And so that's going to be something that he has to deal with. And if you want to hear more about my takes on LS and maybe the problems that he might face within, this entire head coach position, you can go and watch my video. I'll link it down in the description below. But I just go more in depth about his situation, right? But this is the big thing that I think is might plague him within this team. Additionally, Vigar V2 and Max Waldo, I think they've proven their worth. I think both of them seem very intelligent about the game. When I spoke with Max Waldo, he seemed very bright, actually, about his ideas about the game. And this is why I think I can see why Cloud9 values him so much. He actually has a very philosophical mind, I would say, when it comes to League of Legends itself. So I think this is a perfect squad for that. But the problem is that they don't really have any personality management, anyone to manage personalities, because LS doesn't really have experience with that either. He's known to be this bright mind for the game as well too. So now you have 3 people that are brilliant minds for the game, but like they have no track record of managing personalities, right? So then of course comes the team manager and then Jack, which can hopefully rein in things. So that's the whole wrinkle in this entire thing. Now, secondly, the entire thing that I see with this roster and maybe the problems that might arise with it is the fact that there can be developing, like something can develop such as what I like to call clickiness, which is the fact that there will be pockets of people within the team that have their own clique, right? Their own little group, like their own friends, essentially. And so, as it has been said through multiple teams and, interviewing multiple people on teams, they've reported to say that, yes, there can be this development of a clique to where, Koreans will just stick with Koreans and, they'll only trust the Korean players and they'll only talk in Korean, etc. And so it creates this divide, like this very big, real divide. And, Prawley was actually one of the people that I had talked to about this, to where he had said, like, yeah, like that was one thing that I was very afraid of, whenever having multiple Koreans on a rosters, is the fact that, yeah, there can be this small group and maybe they could feel ostracized, or if they're the bigger group, maybe then, they can oppress the other group necessarily. So that's one thing to be concerned about. The last additional thing I think with this coaching staff is the idea of LS just being able to deal with the haters. Like, does he have the strength, I guess, to deal with all the hate that is probably going to come his way? Because just as much as, people love LS, there is also his haters. So you have the duality of man necessarily. And so I'm wondering if he's going to be able to shoulder that entire weight. That's not to say that LS is weak or that I'm insinuating that he's weak at all, but there's certainly a lot and a massive amount of pressure because he's coming into the Western audience, which is most of his fan base, in fact, and everyone has their eyes on Cloud9. So I think this is a very interesting situation, but I do actually expect Cloud9 to be one of the stronger teams, in fact, in the LCS, despite all of the pitfalls that I had talked about. I think they do generally have good players on paper, even though I don't know much about Summit, even though I don't know much about Berserker, although he is touted to be pretty good. I do actually believe in the other players, on the squad, Winsome, I guess, too. I don't really know much about, but Blabber and Fudge, I think Fudge can adapt. I think the ability for LS to be able to teach these players strategically about the game is going to prove them dramatically. I think with the likes of Max Waldo and Vigar V2, like they're going to be able to improve these players pretty significantly. It's just, can everything hold together, with all the other concerns? I think that maybe would prevent them from getting to the top echelon of the league. So we'll see if they can actually do that. But most certainly, I think this squad is actually top 4.